In this video, we're going to identify the trig components of a graph, assuming it's a sine or a cosine function. So to begin with, we're going to assume that this is a sine graph. So one of the first things we like to do is to identify the midline. So the midline is going to be the line that cuts this graph in half. So I'll come up here, and that appears to be at 1. So here we can write that out. Y equals 1. Now, if it's not so easy to identify the middle of the graph, then typically what you're going to want to do is to find your highest y value and your lowest y value, add them and divide by 2. So if I did that, my highest y value here is going to be 3. My lowest y value is going to be -1. And if I divide these by 2, that will tell me where the midline is. So here, this is going to be 3 minus 1, which is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So algebraically, that's how you could find your midline. Now, what's convenient about finding the midline is that tells us what our vertical shift of the function is. So this vertical shift, we would want to say is up 1, because sine normally has a midline at the x-axis. But this sine has a midline at 1, so it has a vertical shift of 1. Next, we'll want to find the amplitude. The amplitude is the distance from a crest to the midline. So here we have a distance of 2, so our amplitude is 2. The period is found measuring from a crest to crest, a trowel to trowel, or a phase shift to another phase shift. So here, there are no two crests, so we're going to measure from this trowel at -pi4 to this trowel at 7 pi4. And that is going to be a distance of 2 pi. So phase shift with sine, you're going to need two things. You're going to need the x value of a crest. So here I can say the x of a crest, and you're going to need the x value of a trowel. So we'll say the x value of a crest, the x value of a trowel, and then we are going to divide these values by 2. So if I look at a crest, I have one here at 3 pi4. So that's the x value of this crest. So this will be 3 pi over 4. And I'll add the x value of a trowel, which is -pi4. So here, instead of adding, we're just going to be subtracting. So we'll minus pi over 4, and we will divide this answer by 2. So 3 pi4 minus pi4, this is going to give us 2 pi4, or pi halves. And when you divide something by 2, remember that you have to keep change flip. So dividing by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. So that means our phase shift is at pi over 4. So we can look here, and we can identify at pi over 4, we have a phase shift. So this is the start of the sine graph as it moves up, and then it comes back down, coming back up to our midline over here. Now, if we were going to take all 4 of these components and use them to write out the equation, first we would need to write out what the equation of a sine graph looks like. So we have y equals a times sine of b, x minus c plus d. So this is the equation of a standard sine graph. What we're going to do is take the components we just found from the graph and plug them into our equation. So our amplitude is 2 times sine. Now, this is the part that you have to be wary of. B is not the period. B is the horizontal dilation. With a sine graph, the way we find the value of B is we're going to say 2 pi divided by whatever the period is. So here, our period was 2 pi. Our phase shift we found to be pi over 4. And our vertical shift went up 1, so we're going to say plus 1. Now what we'll do is we'll clean this up a little bit and we'll simplify the 2 pi over 2 pi. And we have y equals 2 times sine of x minus pi over 4 plus 1. So this is the equation that generates this graph. Now we're going to look at the exact same graph and we're going to write out the 4 components, but we're going to assume that this is a cosine function. So we'll still find the midline first. So as we found in example 1, the midline here is going to be y equals 1. So the vertical shift is 1. The amplitude is the same because it is the distance from a crest to the midline. So this has a distance of 2, so the amplitude is 2. You find the value of the period by measuring from crest to crest or trowel to trowel. So we still have a period of 2 pi. The only difference with cosine is the phase shift. The phase shift with cosine is found on the crest, not the midline. So here I have a crest at 3 pi over 4. So that's going to be my phase shift here. Now what we'll do is we'll take these 4 components and we'll write the equation for this function as though it were a cosine graph. So our equation is y equals a times cosine b x minus c plus d. So these are your 4 components. So a is the amplitude. So we're going to say 2 times cosine. Remember, b is not the period. B is the horizontal dilation. We find the period by saying 2 pi divided by the period. Our phase shift is 3 pi over 4. And our vertical shift was 1. So we'll clean this up and we'll say this equation is 2 times cosine x minus 3 pi over 4 plus 1. So you should be noticing that the sine and the cosine equations are exactly the same with the exception of the phase shift. All right, that's going to be it for this video. If you found it helpful, please make sure that you hit that like and subscribe button. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments and I'll get to them as soon as I can. We'll see you all in the next video.